A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
We're turning our attention to our workplace today. A healthy workplace can be an amazingly empowering experience, but a toxic workplace can make your life an absolute misery. And if you're a leader in your workplace, you'll know that it can cause productivity to plummet. So is your workplace toxic, unsafe? Is it burning people out? Is there a high turnover of staff and your employees have low morale? Is your workplace toxic, unsafe, and really the worst place to be? So, whose responsibility is it to make your organisation healthy, functional and productive? Well, a conversation today about the culture we have in our workplaces and extending that to the culture we might have in our churches and Christian organisations. If things are not good, you might be interested in real practical insights as to how to turn those things around. Our special guest through this coming hour, Mike Symonds, leads interactive events, working with businesses to optimise culture and inspire teams. He's based on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, in the town of Sawtell, just south of Coffs Harbour. And he's joining us. Hey, Mike, welcome along to 2020.
Thanks so much, Neil. Excuse me. I really appreciate it.
Mike, let's start. What can go wrong in the workplace? If we're going to talk about turning around a workplace today, we might like to talk about what can go wrong. Some of those things I've described in my introduction there. Well, what are you seeing in workplaces that are calling you in? Maybe you're the Mr. Fix-It rescue guy.
Yeah, look, great question. And you mentioned a lot of the problems that do occur within workplaces, in many workplaces, unfortunately. Some of those things are, as you mentioned, the toxicity. So, you wake up in the morning and literally just feel sick in the stomach of having to go to work each day. And they demonstrate themselves in, sort of poor relationships, conflict, ego struggles can be a big thing. And often people feeling disconnected. We all want to belong, don't we, Neil? We all want to feel like we're a part of something. And often for a lot of people, there can be that disconnect. And so we disengage, we're simply going through the motions, doing what we have to do and not really making any kind of impact. And from a business perspective, that then relates to poor performance, poor productivity, and then potentially putting that business at risk. So, yeah, it can be a huge issue, not only on the financial terms of a business, but also the psychological and the emotional aspect as well.
Okay, poor relationships, ego struggles, disconnection. This is perhaps a little bit deeper than just, I woke up this morning, I'm having a bad hair day and not wanting to go to work, not really appreciating that, others might not see the need that I have right now to maybe to be alone. It's more than that, just that individual feeling not so good today. These things go deeper, don't they, when we're talking about workplace culture? Yeah,
they do. It might start off as just a bit of a reluctance, but over time, I think there's a deeper meaning there. And what it really is, I think deep down, every single one of us want to feel significant. We want to feel like we're of value, we're worthy, we're making a contribution. And one of the biggest challenges I think we have as a society is that feeling of not feeling like we're enough. And often, when we go into a workplace, we want to know we're making some kind of difference. I think the world's kind of changing when it comes to work. If you look at COVID as that line in the sand a little bit, where in the past, many people would kind of just go along to work to earn the pay packet. But now there seems to be a bit of an uprising in the sense of people are wanting more than just that. They're wanting to feel good within themselves. They're wanting to make some kind of impact in their world. And so that toxicity stuff, it's that sense of I guess the opposite of that, not feeling valued, not feeling like we're enough, not feeling like we're a part of something and we belong. And so, as you say, it's more than just a bad hair day. And look, I know about bad hair days. Let's face facts there. But it's more than just those little kind of niggles. It's really just turning up to work and just going, I'm in the wrong place. This is not where I'm meant to be. And often, unfortunately, for a lot of people and for a lot of business owners, we put up with that as opposed to taking practical steps to improve it.
You know, it's probably a normal thing to have aspirations to move to something better. If you think, well, this is not the job for me, I'm just going through the motions, maybe you don't have that opportunity right now and you need to make the most of what you've got. But I'm just thinking, you know, sometimes it's easy for the employee just to blame the boss. But is there something in the attitude of the employee that might even be an important starting point here? Because perhaps more people listening might be employees than bosses. No doubt there's lots of bosses listening too. But talk to us about the employee and the attitude that we might have to our own work rather than just casting the blame to someone who's above us.
Yeah, look, it's very easy to point the finger, isn't it? It's very easy to blame someone else, to shift responsibility and to pass the buck to someone else, whether it's the business owner or the business leader. And it works both ways. You know, I think that even if you're a leader, often a lot of leaders will blame the staff and say they're to blame, and often not taking the time to hold the mirror to themselves. For employees, look, the same applies. You know, I think the key thing is to, one, recognise what are the things that are outside of my control, what are the things within my control. And then it is about just reframing that kind of attitude and getting clear around, you know, I guess who the Lord has designed you to be, and getting clear around those giftings that He's given you, the good works that He's designed for you, and then start to take the attitude of, I'm using this moment or this experience to grow my character, to do the good works that I'm called to do, no matter what those obstacles are from the outside, and taking responsibility for our own attitude, our own behaviour, and then just knowing that in our heart of hearts, we're doing the best we can given the circumstances.
So one of those things might be, as an employee, you recognise even that sort of biblical foundation. Who do you work for ultimately here? Do you work for the boss? Or, you know, in the Christian sense, we have a transcendent God, and in a sense we're part of His kingdom, so therefore we work for God, not just an employer. But the employer, if they're not easy to get on with, then we're obviously going to be discerning around whether we stay or how we actually improve our workplace. Hey, you like to take organisations through what you call a culture pulse check. So a little bit of an evaluation. Is your workplace toxic? Does it need some attention? Where do we start with a bit of a culture pulse check for listeners today? How does this work typically?
Yeah, look, the first thing we need to have a look at is our own selves as leaders. So looking at our own behaviour, looking at recognising that the kind of culture that we've got is a direct reflection of us as leaders. There's an incredible study that was done where they got two teams. One was a high-performing team, one was low-performing. All they simply did was swap the leaders over. And then sure enough, the low-performing team then rose to higher standards, and the high-performing team dropped down to the level of that leader. So the first thing we need to do is have a look at your own behaviour. At a couple of things. Do you have some of the essential pieces in place? So the foundations upon which to build great culture, and this is very biblical in the sense of the first is a clear purpose. You know, why do we exist? How are we making this world a better place? We're not just simply selling widgets. We're actually serving our community, our people, our world. And then the second one then is the values piece, you know, so what are our values? But also too, are we actually living and breathing those values, or are they simply words on a wall? So what are the behaviours that underpin each of those values? So they're the starting points that we start with in that culture pulse check. Do you have the foundations in place? And then from that, if you do or you don't, then what are the other things you're building, like rhythms and routines and behaviours and coaching and all the tools then, and are they in alignment with who you are, why you exist and what you stand for? It's a process we go through, and we're looking for that misalignment or missing pieces, and sort of helping businesses identify what are three quick, easy steps they can take to move forward towards building a stronger culture.
Mike, take us just a little below the surface here, maybe a little bit deeper, because we're all emotional people. Is emotional? Maybe the board, they're emotional as well. They're all looking at the bottom line saying, can we do better here? The staff, they're all emotional people too. Are we, when we talk about a workplace culture, dealing a lot, and maybe not primarily, but dealing a lot with just how everybody is emotionally responding to the way we're actually doing things together in business here?
Yeah, we are. I mean, I think identity plays a really important role in all of this. So whether we're a leader or whether we're an employee, our sense of who we are and what's important to us actually then filters every interaction, every conversation, every reaction that we have. So where I mentioned about the study where they swap the leaders over, obviously some of the greatest work you can do is on yourself and around who you are, your identity, what you respond to, the rules that we've created in our own minds, and potentially just balancing or rewiring those through the help of God, so we can actually just keep evolving and start walking the walk more and continuing that sanctification process, and then obviously strengthening our identity. And the clearer we are about our identity is then going to influence how we choose to respond emotionally.
Interesting to use that word sanctification, because we might think of that as aligning with a holy God. And aligning is a good word to talk about what's happening, because our identity is being pointed towards Christ. In other words, being like Christ, even thinking like him, even speaking like him, acting like him. So you like to talk about people in your organisation singing from the same song sheet. We understand that sometimes in church life, but what we're talking about here is really like a definition of how you actually form culture. Is this a way to talk about how you think about the culture in your workplace?
Totally. I think there's a couple of viruses that get in the way of culture, and one of those is unmet expectations. So an employee might have an expectation, a leader might have an expectation, and those unmet expectations then kind of build resentment. One of the greatest tools is actually to deal with unmet expectations is clarity. So it's really about just singing from the same song sheet, is getting clear as a business around who are we? What is our purpose? Why are we here? Who are we serving? What are our priorities as a business? What are our values? And as I mentioned before, starting those as the foundation, but really that's singing from the same song sheet. So we know what's expected. You often hear people say with workplaces, it's just how we do things around here. It's how it's done. It's actually then verbalizing the unspoken and just making sure that everyone is completely clear around our identity as a business, the impact we make, who we're serving, how we're serving them, and how we treat ourselves, each other, and our customers. And the greater clarity we have, then it's easier to sing from the same song sheet.
2020 on Vision Christian Radio.
We're talking about toxic culture, either in our workplace or maybe in our church or Christian organisation. Toxic culture, something that affects every one of us. Hey, Mike, let's talk about leaders here. We spent a little bit of time talking about, how you handle things if you are the employee. You're a little bit disempowered because really the toxic culture probably is coming from above, as you say. The culture in your organisation is a direct reflection of what happens in the leaders of that organisation. So what are we talking about here if we're moving towards a thought or two around the role of leaders looking to resolve a toxic culture? Where do you want to go here?
Oh, leaders in resolving a toxic culture. Great question, Neil. Look, I think that the first thing that leaders need to understand or ask themselves is, am I a part of the problem? I think that it's that self-reflection, to stand back and honestly ask yourself, how am I potentially contributing to this? And so with that in mind, then look, there's a number of different models coaching models we work with leaders to take those steps. But really, in order to to fix culture in regards from a leader, it's that self-awareness. It's really about having a look at, your communication approach. What are the things that you place importance on? How are you sharing that information? So one of the greatest things you can do is actually, as a leader, is get your team together, get your staff together, and ask them. Say, look, hey, I recognise that maybe things aren't quite working the way that we all would like to, and asking for some open, honest feedback without potentially getting upset, without any judgment, without potentially reinforcing potentially a culture of fear or emotional unsafety, but just asking them genuinely from the heart of, look, we want to learn, I want to grow, I want to create something amazing here. So sharing the vision of what you want and then asking them, what are your thoughts? What's holding us back? What's holding us back? Is one of the most powerful questions you can ask your team. And as soon as you start to engage with your team and get their input, you then providing them the opportunity to have some ownership over the business. And that in itself then boosts engagement. They feel like, hey, I have a level of influence or control here. And just that act in itself will actually start to shift the needle a little bit, just a tiny bit, towards the right direction when it comes to culture.
Being honest with yourself as the boss. Some will say, well, my boss, I'm the boss, I'm the business owner perhaps, everyone does it my way or it's the highway, and, don't challenge what's going on. It takes a fair bit of humility, doesn't it, to step up as the boss if you recognise there's a toxic culture in your organisation, to be able to then let others in with an honest opinion. So if everyone's game enough to give you an honest opinion and not be targeted if they do. But this is a humility issue, isn't it? If you recognise you've got to do something as the boss, you've got to humble yourself a little and listen to what the staff are saying.
Totally, Neil, totally. For yourself and anyone listening or watching, do me a favour, grab a pen and paper and just write down the letters LLNESS. So just write those down for now. LLNESS. And so there's almost a scale when it comes to culture. So one we have toxic, the other end we have inspired, in the middle we have transactional. So a toxic culture, as I mentioned before, is very ego-driven. And when it's ego-driven, it's all about the I. So if we put I at the forefront of those letters, what do we get? We get illness. Yep. Yeah. Whereas a purpose-driven culture, an inspired culture, is all about the we. You cannot have success in a business unless you're willing to give up control, invite other people in and help them to be a part of something bigger than you will ever be as the business owner. So if we put we at the forefront of those letters, what do we get? We get wellness. Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, it's that ability to being humble. It's the ability to actually embrace the we as opposed to the I.
Okay, let me just worst case scenario. Your boss or bosses listening, all of a sudden decide that none of this is for me. I'm not going to listen to anything that's going to bring wellness. We'll stay with the illness and see if we can see it through, because you're somehow rather, as I've had conversations before on this program, like a sociopathic boss, where really my way or the highway, or manipulation, even exploitation of your staff, not willing to listen. You're probably going to stay small, or your business may fail, and unless you make some changes. So you have to have some sort of honest input. Does it sometimes, Mike, take someone from outside to point out some of the issues, and you might not be seeing your own faults? Am I delving a little too deep here?
No, look, I think it happens quite a bit. It depends on the structure of the business and the structure of the organisation. Obviously, for a lot of the people that I'm kind of working with, there's already an awareness that something's not right and they need that external help. So they're halfway there. But when we're working with larger organisations, and potentially it might be, as an example, The senior exec team have identified there's issues, but then we have to work with middle management. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's that challenge. It's that, everyone else is the problem bar me. And man, sometimes they're tough, and sometimes you have those hard conversations to come in because you're coming in as an outsider. There's no emotional attachment from my perspective, except I want to see the best for you and for your team. So it probably almost gives me the power to be able to be honest and to share, to have some of those blunt conversations in a loving way. To potentially create change or to help people see someone else's perspective. But end of the day, it's their choice. They need to see that, hey, maybe their behaviour is not conducive to a great workplace, and it's up to them to make that final decision. All we can do is sometimes just hold the mirror up and ask a few pointed questions to potentially shift that perception a little bit about how they see themselves or how they see the situation.
We've been really sort of settling around some of the tough things, the hard parts of a conversation, if you're talking about a toxic culture, and I hope we can just bring things to a little bit more a positive progression here, because there must be, and we're only just shortly out from the news, there must be some tremendous benefits to actually identifying you've got some issues, you've got a way to resolve those, you've got a plan in place. What are the benefits getting things right?
For a business leader or for your team, for your staff, first of all, it's peace. It gives you this emotional sense of peace, almost the fruits of the spirit. It takes that pressure off. And that's what I've seen with a lot of my clients, especially from early days to where we finish off, is there's just they have this smile on their face and they actually enjoy coming to work. But I guess from a business perspective, look, there's two things to consider. There's basically the cost of disengagement versus also the benefits of actually having a strong culture. So look, disengagement, it's currently sitting in Australia around 75% on average of employees being disengaged in the workplace. And so a disengaged staff member will potentially have cost you about a third of their annual salary in lost productivity.
Just before we take a call, Mike, we started talking just before the news about the benefits of getting things right. You said one of the biggest benefits is going off to work each day with a smile on your face. And if you can work out those issues around a toxic culture, your life is going to be worth living. But you did say that something like 75% of employees are disengaged in the workplace. So there's a big field of people here to work with, isn't there?
There is. And look, that's the latest study that's come out through Gallup. And they're a mix of people who are actively disengaged. And so these are the kind of people or the situations that are driving a wedge within the business. But then a large portion of that, they're kind of sitting on the fence, and they're almost what I call transactional about their work. There's no strong commitment, desire, and it's just simply turning up for a pay packet and do what I have to do and then leave for the day. So if we can just win that low-hanging fruit, have especially focus on those people that we can shift over into the engaged I guess, bucket. There are so many benefits. And there's a few studies that really jump out at me to reinforce this point. So obviously, from a business perspective, we're going to have revenue growth, retention, productivity, customer satisfaction, profitability. But also, too, I think impact is a big one too. So when the more engaged staff we have, the greater impact we can make. And that applies to the church as well. But there's a few studies there, Neil. The first one that jumps out at me is one by Gapbusters. This was done some time ago. All they did was focus on employee satisfaction for 3 months. During that time, employee satisfaction rose by 6%, but customer satisfaction rose by 18%. And as we know in business, that it costs more to win a new customer than what it does to retain an existing customer. And often when we have that long-term customer, that's when we build profitability into that customer. The other one that jumps out at me, again through Gallup, organisations that have strong culture have actually experienced 21% more profitability than those organisations that have poor culture. But the one that I love, because this is something that we did, it was working with a team who hadn't achieved their targets within a 16-month period. And so all we simply did for 1 month was just focus on one of 4 key principles for no more than 5 minutes a day. And in that 5 minutes, it was integrated into how they went about work. And engagement rose by 10%, but then productivity improved by 47%. It was the first time in 16 months that they had not only met their target, but had exceeded their target. But there's a few lessons to take from this, Neil, because after the month, I wasn't there to keep driving it. And so they stopped doing what was working, and then straight away went back to their comfort zone, and then performance went back to how it was prior. So it just shows that it takes time to embed that new culture, but you need to be consistent and act on it each day. And it only takes a few minutes each day to make a change and to shift something from what was negative to something that's positive.
I can't help but think that our national leadership, the Prime Minister, would be thrilled that we're having a conversation like this, because Australia's productivity is pretty low as far as I understand it. They're just working on all sorts of things. How do we turn around Australia's productivity? And I know that's a big economist question, but we'll just go with some listener calls now. But 1-800-316-316, you can help direct where our conversation goes. Let's hear from Luciana in Kings Park in Melbourne. Luciana, thanks for waiting so patiently. What are your thoughts?
God bless you, Neil and Mike. It's a very important topic. I've been a volunteer for Brimbank City Council 25 years, and currently now I'm a leader of a women's group. And those topics are very important because how we interact with the people coming is going to affect how they're going to lead to others. One of the principles that I always use in conversation, like what Mike said, is not about I, but it's about we. It's to remind them that if they do have some thoughts or they're not happy about something, not to go away and gossip, but to bring it to the table. So therefore, everyone can feel that they are heard, and also to bring to the perspective and the vision of the group, what we're going to achieve, what we want to achieve. Because sometimes you come across people that they want to dominate the conversation, and sometimes it can take different twists and turns. But in a polite way, I just say, okay, let's go back to the initial thoughts. We're going to improve in this direction and back it up always with the scriptures from the Bible.
Luciana, wisdom, and my suspicion is some hard-fought decisions that have had to be made to get that sort of wisdom. Hey, Mike, what are your thoughts here for Luciana? What stands out?
Look, I think the thing that stands out the most, thank you so much, Luciana, for your thoughts. I think you've hit the nail on the head in regards to getting clarity around the vision of the group. Like, what is your vision? What is your purpose? What is it you're wanting to achieve as a group? And unfortunately, in workplaces and volunteer groups, gossiping can be one of those things that can almost like a bed of weeds that can really kind of take over. And so we need to make sure that we're on top of that. And the best way to deal with the gossiping is, as you said, to bring it back to the vision. This is why we're here. Sure, someone stole my stapler, or from a volunteer perspective, someone didn't do what they said they were going to do. That stuff's not important. What's really important is the bigger vision, the thing that we're working towards that's bigger than us, and keeping that focus on your primary reason for being there. And that's a great approach to take, Luciana.
Luciana, anything further to add?
No, God bless you, and thank you, Vision Radio, for the amazing work that you guys are doing. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Luciana. Kings Park in Melbourne, 1-800-316-316. To join in our conversation, let's take another call. Richard is in Alstonville in New South Wales. Hey, Richard, welcome.
G'day, guys. I've got a question for you. I'm not exactly sure if this is obtaining to what you're talking about, but dealing with customers from a sole subcontractor's point of view, how do you deal with a situation when you're dealing with a customer with rights and things like that? From a biblical point of view and also from a practical point of view?
What do you mean by rights there, Richard?
So, okay, trying to think of an example. Say you have a customer and you've got a pay dispute or a dispute over work that's been done, and the customer doesn't want to pay, or they're trying to take you to, say, like fair trading or somebody like that. Where's a biblical principle I can go back to in that situation?
Okay, good. Let's hear from Mike here. Sounds to me like a justice issue involved here, but I'll say a few words perhaps after I give you the opportunity here, Mike. Your thoughts for Richard?
Yeah, look, it's a tough one, Richard. I'm not one to be giving advice from a legal perspective, and that there's probably pathways, I'm sure, through small claims court, you can take steps you can take to address that non-payment. I think, look, from a biblical perspective, I'm quite new in my walk with Christ. So I guess, Neil might be a better person around sort of the biblical scriptures, but I think for myself, it's really about intention, and it's really about I think sometimes what is God calling you to learn through this experience, whether it is to hold you ground and to put on the armor of Christ and potentially just stand in that belt buckle of truth and wear the breastplate of righteousness. I think that's maybe a great scripture to kind of go back to, depending, and looking at the value that you've given. And sometimes it could, from a business perspective, it can be an indicator that maybe there's some things you might need to get into place prior in regards to, how you choose your clients, making sure you're working with people who value you and you value them. That's a big thing I pray about all the time. I only ever want to work with people who value the work that I do, and asking for God's guidance with that. But also too, when we bring people on board, the customers, when we induct them, just making sure that they're clear about this is who we are, this is how we work, these are the expectations. And sometimes it comes back to that lack of clarity that can lead us to these moments. But then I think, it's then dealing with it now that we're here. It's really about just, I think sometimes it's sometimes it can be a learning experience, and depends on the situation. I don't know the details of it, but I think you need to maybe go to prayer and ask God for guidance around, is this something that I need to anchor myself in and hold my ground and be firm? Or is this an opportunity for me just to recognise that, hey, maybe in a situation that's probably worse than me, and maybe I need to forgive and move on and then work towards something, bigger and stronger and better that God has planned for me.
Well, Richard, if I was putting my 2 bobs worth in, I just thought of Zacchaeus, the biblical character, the short guy, climbed the tree to see Jesus. Jesus stops and says, "Hey, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your place for lunch." We realise that Zacchaeus is a businessman and he's a tax collector and siphoning off funds from the top, and clearly lots of disputes with his customers because they all thought this guy is ripping me off. And in his encounter with Christ, he has a major turnaround. And this is where this whole justice thing comes in, because my suspicion is that if you're a businessman and you're running your business in an unjust way, that's not going to do the morale of your staff or your customers any good. That's why that trust and integrity in business is clearly going to be a major point of your business's success. And so, yes, being able to discern what's happening when the dispute with your clients comes, and even recognising that sort of biblical principle that we might see in Zacchaeus, that might be a useful thing. Anyway, Richard, does that strike a chord?
Yep, covers a few areas. Yep, thank you.
Fabulous stuff. Richard, thanks so much for your call. 1-800-316-316 to join in our conversation. Let's take another call. Peter is in Eltham. Peter, welcome along.
Oh, good day, Neil. It's nice to be in on the conversation. Just thinking about Ben's words about the 75% of workers who are disengaged, and just reflecting on my own experience I worked in a wellbeing organisation that actually had a toxic culture. It was a wellbeing organisation that the culture was really quite bad management. And I'm just thinking two things come to mind to me as an employee was presence, like when management came and showed particular interest in my work and actually sent a letter saying appreciate your work, and words of encouragement. I just find words of encouragement so helpful. And I could see they're two powerful things that really bring greater engagement.
Wonderful insight there, Peter. What are your thoughts here, Mike, for Peter?
Yeah, look, I think you're spot on, Peter. There's a few things I want to share about this. It's interesting. I'm working with a client now where we're actually going around and speaking with every single staff member, over 450. What are the things that they love about the culture? What are the things that they think should be addressed? And one of the things that came up, and you're noticing the difference in the mindsets of those locations that have a strong presence from senior management. So there's that strong physical presence as opposed to those locations where senior management very rarely kind of visit. So just that mere presence, I think, plays an integral role in feeling as though you belong. The next piece you mentioned there about appreciation, words of encouragement, something like 69% of staff feel like their leaders don't appreciate them enough. Where I mentioned the work that we did with those 4 key principles, the first principle was connect, so actually building strong relationships with each other, taking a genuine interest in the people you work with. The second piece was then around appreciation, actually expressing appreciation, being grateful for the people you work with, the work they do, but most importantly, who they are as people. And then the third piece was around serving. So actually rolling your sleeves up, getting in and lifting someone up, whether it's words of encouragement or acts of encouragement, lifting them up so they can be the best versions of themselves. And then the fourth principle was have some fun, have some laughter amongst all that. And, you know, they're really simple principles, and they're godly principles, you know, that really can make a massive difference to the workplace, the feeling, the culture of your business.
Peter, anything else to add?
No, thank you, Neil. That's a really great conversation, and I appreciate just hearing these concrete statistics backing up what I already might have experienced. So, no, that's fine. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Neil.
Peter, thank you for
Peter.
a great contribution too. Hey, 1-800-316-316 to join in our conversation. You can also send us a text like Greg has. Greg on the Gold Coast says, I worked with a large organisation and there was great work culture. Then there was a change in the organisation, splitting the workforce. A new manager was brought in. So the new managers that brought in their family and friends, got a little in brackets, nepotism. This caused a great deal of distrust and resentment. Thoughts here for Greg and his text?
Yeah, look, it's a great observation. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, when it comes to especially small business or even large business, is there's that feeling for some staff that there is that nepotism or favoritism towards certain employees, that, you know, that person has a personal relationship with the boss. So there's signs of favoritism and everything else. So again, it's hard. It's hard. As a leader, you're going to have people that you're naturally drawn to, that you connect better with. If there's family involved or friends, you've got to find a clear line between, you know, what's work related, what's personal related, and just really keep checking in on yourself. What message am I sending through this relationship or this interaction, and making sure it's hard, but there's equity across the board. It's something that comes up in so many workplaces, that feeling of, you know, leaders have their favourites, and I'm not one of them, so I'm not going to receive the benefits of that. And it just simply adds to resentment. It just builds that resentment.
And every workplace is going to have some level of difference, and you work with small to medium-sized businesses, Mike, and some of those will be wanting to train up a next generation who'll be taking over in a family business. And so you've got a lot of businesses that are family-run, and yes, the son or the daughter comes in. They might not be as easy to deal with. They might be prickly characters even, but somehow or other you've got to appreciate that in a family business there'll be an intergenerational view that that business person has too, and being able to appreciate that's going to be a useful thing. Hey, we've been talking about business, the places we work, and I'm conscious that, you know, there's going to be some different types of issues that relate to church and Christian organisations. Most of the same principles still generally apply, don't they? Whether you're talking about workplaces or whether you're talking about church organisations, you were talking about, a transactional way of treating employees. In other words, they're getting a pay packet at the end of the week. In church life, it's a little bit different because it's more a transformational thing. They're not being paid to be there; they're volunteers. Is there an extra dimension that you can identify around what happens in a volunteer setting that is necessary beyond the transactional pay for your services view?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question, Neil, and I think Luciana, sort of touched on it a bit in her question in regards to the volunteers. I think a lot of the principles regarding work versus that volunteer kind of sector still apply. I think it's just, and I guess in a church environment is our standards and expectations raised, don't they? They're much higher than what they might be in a workplace of what we expect from our leadership group. You mentioned before about leadership, and one of the key things is, I think, within a church environment, working with volunteers is equipping. So starting to equip those future leaders, starting to provide them with the skills, the tools, the ability to actually, take the church where they need to. The volunteers are an amazing group of people, because they're there because they want to be, not because they have to be. They're there because they're passionate. And with that passion, though, can sometimes come a bit of burnout or becoming so passionate they like Luciana mentioned, people kind of reinforce, well, this is what I want. This is what I think is important. So it's really important to, again, just probably stress more so what is the vision, what are we working towards, and equipping people to then be able to go and do that. I think one of the biggest challenges with churches and culture is asking yourself, are we a talk the talk church, or are we walk the walk church? So are we a church where, the congregation turns up on a Sunday, listens to the word, has a shared lunch, see you later, goodbye, and walks off to live their life however they choose? Or are you a church that's actually doing the work of the Lord and going out into the community, serving, growing, stretching the further to increase territory for your particular? And it's interesting, if I can just share a quick story, the church I'm involved in here on the mid-north coast, there was, from one of our pastors, there was just this word of chaplaincy. Just getting chaplains into the local community. And so it was put out to the congregation. We're going to hold a little training session, but it's just, what are the key principles of chaplaincy that you can incorporate into your daily life? We were expecting 15 people, and then 80 people turned up to the session. Wow. And then through that, we recognise they need support. So that volunteer group, they need the training, the equipping, and the support. And then through that, they would put their hand up and say, we want more. We want more of this. Great. So we got some trainers in from Chaplaincy Australia who delivered some more pointed training. Off the back of that, great, we want more. We want more. And it was, okay, now we've got, I think, about 30 odd people going through the Certificate 4 in chaplaincy. And it all started we had no idea of the pathway forward. It was just this recognition that there was something there, a need in the community, but it was just that simple one action. Now, what has been happening in the background is, as we've started this training, out of the blue, people have been contacting the church saying, we need a chaplain. Do you guys have chaplains? Well, actually, we do. So it's a great example of then, in that church environment of just starting with something small, equipping your volunteers, supporting them, recognising that because they are driven through passion, they might need time to rest, but being clear on your vision. So when things start to potentially go sideways, you bring it back to that vision. And this is why we're here. It's bigger than us as an individuals. This is for the work of the Lord.
Equipping takes us to a point too, just like we were talking earlier. Singing from the same song sheet. And, we might look at common words on a screen these days in church life, most churches, but it's that ability to sing in unison together. There's a real illustration there, isn't there, of how we work together. And actually it does happen when you turn up to church on Sunday. We couldn't lose sight of the fact that toxicity in your workplace or in your church is always constantly going to be like a wolf at the door. You've got to be constantly aware of these things, and you've got to get some things in place in your culture to try and work through those and have a healthy working environment together. For listeners who want to connect with our special guest today, Mike Symonds. Now, Mike, this is what he does. He leads organisations to optimise their culture and inspire teams. He has practical, real ways of actually helping your team to become productive, to become profitable, to become a team that works together and turning up to work with a smile on your face. You try and put some value on all of that. To connect with Mike, you can do so. His website is interactiveevents.com.au. interactiveevents.com.au. Mike, a pleasure talking through these issues with you today. I want to thank you so much for taking time to share your heart with listeners today on 2020.
Beautiful. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.